I thought I was walking into another ordinary Sunday dinner at my parents' house in suburban Chicago. The smell of my mother's pot roast filled the dining room as we gathered around the familiar oak table where I'd eaten countless meals growing up. My father cleared his throat in that serious way that usually meant someone was getting lectured about responsibility or family values. But instead of the usual speech about visiting more often, he dropped a bombshell that shattered my world in 88 words. He announced that I would be sharing my 3-bedroom house with my brother Marcus and his family of 4. The betrayal hit like ice water as everyone nodded in agreement, apparently having planned this ambush without consulting me. The silence that followed my father's announcement felt suffocating. I stared at each face around the table, searching for some sign that this was an elaborate joke. My mother's pursed lips and disapproving glare told me otherwise. My sister Jessica avoided eye contact, suddenly fascinated by her mashed potatoes. Marcus sat back in his chair with a smug expression I recognized from childhood, the same look he wore when he got away with breaking something and letting me take the blame. "Jeffrey, don't look so shocked." My father continued, cutting into his roast with deliberate precision. "You've been living alone in that big house for 3 years now. 3 bedrooms for one person is wasteful." "Wasteful!" I managed to croak, finding my voice. "Dad, I bought that house. I saved for years, worked overtime, and sacrificed to afford it." My mother set down her fork with enough force to make the china rattle. "Don't raise your voice at your father, Jeffrey. We raised you better than that. This family takes care of each other, and right now, Marcus needs our help." I turned to Marcus, who was 35 years old and should have been capable of taking care of his own family. "What happened to your job at the accounting firm?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Budget cuts. They had to let people go. It happens to everyone these days." "That was 6 months ago," I pointed out. "What have you been doing since then?" "Looking for the right opportunity." Patricia chimed in, speaking for the first time since we'd sat down. My sister-in-law had always been particular about appearances, and even now facing what she claimed was a housing crisis, she wore a designer blouse and perfectly styled hair. "Marcus isn't going to take just any job. He has standards." Jessica finally looked up from her plate. "Jeffrey, we've all been talking about this for weeks. You make good money with your software engineering job, especially after that promotion last month. You can afford to help family." The word weeks hit me like a physical blow. "You've been planning this behind my back, meeting about my life without including me. We wanted to present you with a solution instead of just complaints," my father explained, as if orchestrating a family ambush was perfectly reasonable behavior. "Marcus and Patricia need a place to stay while they get back on their feet. You have extra rooms. It's simple mathematics." Simple mathematics. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "This isn't a math problem, Dad. This is my home, my privacy, my life you're trying to rearrange without my consent." My mother's voice took on that guilt-laden tone she'd perfected over decades of manipulation. "I'm disappointed in you, Jeffrey. When did you become so selfish your brother has 2 children to think about?" As if summoned by her words, 8-year-old Tyler and 11-year-old Madison appeared in the doorway, their faces carefully arranged in expressions of innocent hope. Patricia had clearly coached them for this moment. "Uncle Jeffrey," Madison said in a small voice, "are we really going to live in your big house? Mommy said you have a backyard with space for a swing set." My heart clenched at the manipulation, but I recognized it for what it was. Patricia was using her children as emotional weapons, and my family was helping her do it. I looked around the table again, seeing my loved ones in a new light. These people who claimed to care about me had spent weeks plotting to upend my carefully built life. "The thing is," Jessica said, pulling out her phone, "we might have already mentioned to a few people that you agreed to help. The Hendersons from church know, and Mom told Mrs. Patterson from next door. Everyone thinks it's wonderful how you're stepping up for family." The trap closed around me with perfect precision. Not only had they planned this without me, they'd told the community that I'd already agreed. Refusing now would make me look like a heartless liar who'd gone back on my word to help children in need. Marcus leaned forward with false sincerity. Look, Jeffrey, I know this seems sudden, but we're family. We've always had each other's backs. Remember when you needed help with college tuition, Mom and Dad didn't hesitate. The comparison was so unfair it took my breath away. They'd helped me with tuition as parents supporting their child's education. This was completely different. This was emotional blackmail wrapped in family obligation. How long are we talking about? I asked, grasping for some boundary, some limit to the invasion they were planning. Until we get settled, Patricia said vaguely. Just until Marcus finds the right position and we can afford our own place again. The phrase "the right position" sent warning bells clanging in my head. Marcus had been unemployed for 6 months and showed no signs of lowering his standards or taking interim work. Patricia hadn't worked in years, claiming the children needed her at home. Neither of them seemed to understand that beggars couldn't be choosers. We'll contribute what we can, Marcus added quickly, sensing my reluctance. Help with groceries, utilities, that sort of thing. What you can, I repeated. You just told me you're unemployed. We have some savings, Patricia said defensively. We're not destitute. But if they had savings, why couldn't they rent their own apartment? Why did they need to move into my house specifically? The whole story felt incomplete, like they were hiding something important. My father's voice carried the finality of a judge's gavel. It's settled then. Jeffrey will start moving their things next weekend. Patricia has already started packing. The presumption stole my breath. They'd assumed my cooperation so completely that they'd already begun the moving process. I felt like a defendant who'd just been convicted, without trial sentenced, without even being allowed to present a defense. As dinner continued around me, I sat in stunned silence, mechanically eating my mother's pot roast, while my family chatted about logistics. They discussed which bedroom would work best for Tyler and Madison, whether my home office could be converted to additional sleeping space, and how they'd rearrange my furniture to accommodate everyone. They talked about my house, my space, my life, as if I wasn't sitting right there. As if my opinion and consent were irrelevant details to be worked around rather than fundamental requirements for any decision about my property. When I finally drove home that night, I sat in my driveway for 20 minutes, looking at my house through new eyes. I'd bought it after years of careful saving, choosing the location for its quiet neighborhood, and the layout for its perfect balance of space and privacy. I'd painted every room myself, chosen every piece of furniture, arranged everything exactly how I wanted it. Tomorrow, apparently, none of that would matter anymore. I spent the week after that disastrous family dinner in a state of disbelief, hoping against hope that someone would come to their senses. Maybe Marcus would find a job. Maybe Patricia would realize how unreasonable they were being. Maybe my parents would acknowledge that railroading their son into housing 4 additional people was crossing a line. None of that happened. Instead, I came home from work on Thursday to find a moving truck parked in my driveway. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pulled up to the curb, unable to access my own garage. 3 men in work clothes were carrying boxes from the truck toward my front door, where Patricia stood directing traffic like a general commanding troops. "Careful with that box," she called out. "Those are my good dishes." I climbed out of my car on shaking legs, my laptop bag sliding from my shoulder to hang at an awkward angle. The scene felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life implode in slow motion. "Patricia," I called out, my voice higher than usual. "What's going on here?" She turned toward me with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. Jeffrey, perfect timing. We decided to get started a little early. Your mother gave us the spare key she keeps for emergencies. Emergency key. The words came out as a croak. "This isn't an emergency." "Of course it is," she said, her tone suggesting I was being deliberately obtuse. We need to be out of our rental by Saturday, and waiting until the weekend didn't make sense when we could start now. I watched helplessly as strangers carried boxes of someone else's belongings into my sanctuary. The movers clearly thought they were helping a family move into their new home, not participating in what felt increasingly like a hostile takeover. "Where's Marcus?" I asked, looking around for my brother. "Job interview," Patricia replied, without missing a beat. "Finally got a call back for a position that might actually be worth his time. Fingers crossed." The casual way she mentioned it like an afterthought made me suspicious. If Marcus truly had a promising job interview, wouldn't that change the entire timeline of their supposed temporary stay? I fumbled for my house key, needing to get inside and assess the damage. The moment I stepped through my front door, I stopped breathing. My carefully curated living space had been transformed into chaos. Tyler and Madison were racing through the hallway, their excited shrieks echoing off the walls. Cardboard boxes labeled kitchen stuff and kids' toys were stacked everywhere, blocking pathways and covering every available surface. "Madison, Tyler, calm down," Patricia called half-heartedly before turning back to the movers. "The master bedroom is upstairs, first door on the right. Marcus and I will take that one." "Wait," I said, my voice cracking like a teenager's. "That's my bedroom." Patricia paused, one perfectly manicured eyebrow rising. "Jeffrey, be practical." "Marcus and I need the space for our clothes and the attached bathroom for privacy. You're just one person. The guest room will be perfect for you." The guest room. In my own house, I was being demoted to guest status. I stood there speechless as movers carried a king-sized mattress up my stairs, grunting with effort as they maneuvered it around the corner toward my bedroom. My bedroom that would no longer be mine. "Don't look so worried." Patricia continued, misinterpreting my stunned silence as concern rather than horror. "We'll take good care of everything. I've already started reorganizing the kitchen to be more family-friendly." I stumbled toward my kitchen, dreading what I'd find. The sight that greeted me was worse than I'd imagined. Patricia had emptied my cabinets, throwing away food she deemed unhealthy and replacing my carefully chosen appliances with her own preferences. My coffee maker, an expensive Italian model I'd saved months to afford, sat in a box labeled Goodwill. In its place stood a basic drip coffee maker that looked like it belonged in a college dormitory. "I threw out all that processed food," Patricia explained, following me into the kitchen. "Growing children need proper nutrition. I hope you don't mind, but I also rearranged everything to make more sense. Your organization system was a little chaotic." My organization system had been perfect for my needs, developed over 3 years of living alone and knowing exactly where everything belonged. Now I couldn't find anything. My spice rack had been reorganized alphabetically instead of by frequency of use. My coffee pods had been replaced with generic ground coffee. Even my refrigerator magnets collected from various work trips had been removed and replaced with children's artwork and appointment reminders. "Where did you put my coffee maker?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "Oh, that old thing. It was so complicated, all those buttons and settings. This new one is much simpler. One button, perfect coffee every time." The casual dismissal of my belongings sent a spike of rage through my chest. That wasn't just a coffee maker, it was a symbol of my success, a daily reminder that I'd worked hard enough to afford nice things. She'd thrown it away like garbage without even asking. "Patricia, that was a $600 machine." She waved her hand dismissively. "Jeffrey, you're too attached to material things. This is about family, not fancy gadgets." I heard footsteps on the stairs and looked up to see Marcus descending, wearing a satisfied grin. He changed out of his interview clothes into worn jeans and a t-shirt that had seen better days. "How'd the interview go?" I asked, clinging to hope that he'd gotten the job and this nightmare would be short-lived. "Not what I'm looking for," he said with a shrug. "Small company, limited growth potential. I can do better." My heart sank. Marcus had just turned down employment while moving his family into my house. The entitlement was staggering. The master bedroom is perfect, he continued, oblivious to my growing distress. That walk-in closet will be great for Patricia's clothes, and the attached bathroom means we won't have to share with the kids. Marcus, this is supposed to be temporary, I said desperately. If you're turning down jobs, how temporary can it really be? He clapped me on the shoulder with false camaraderie. Don't worry, little brother. I'm being strategic. Better to wait for the right opportunity than settle for something beneath my qualifications. A few months here while I network properly, and I'll land something really worthwhile. A few months? The timeline kept expanding, and we hadn't even finished the first day. I watched Patricia direct the placement of their furniture in my living room, moving my couch to make room for their entertainment center and coffee table. My carefully chosen decor was being shoved aside to accommodate their preferences. Mom, where does this go? Madison appeared carrying a large framed photo of Marcus and Patricia's wedding. On the mantle, sweetie. Take down that boring landscape picture first. My boring landscape picture was the original watercolor I'd commissioned from a local artist depicting the view from my favorite hiking trail. I'd saved for months to afford it, and it held deep personal meaning. Now it sat propped against the wall, replaced by someone else's memories. The children treated my house like a playground, running from room to room without supervision. Tyler discovered my gaming console and immediately began pulling controllers and games from the entertainment center, scattering everything across the floor. When I started to say something, Patricia cut me off. Boys will be boys, she said with a laugh. Don't be such a worrywart, Jeffrey. Kids need space to be kids. But this was my space filled with expensive electronics and irreplaceable personal items. I wasn't equipped for children, didn't have childproofing, and certainly hadn't consented to becoming a babysitter in my own home. As evening approached, the reality of my new living situation became undeniable. The movers finished unloading and left me with a bill for their services, apparently assuming I was responsible for the costs. Marcus and Patricia disappeared upstairs to get settled in my former bedroom, leaving me with their children and a house I no longer recognized. I stood in my living room surrounded by boxes and foreign furniture, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Everything familiar had been moved, replaced, or discarded. Even the smell was different, a combination of unfamiliar laundry detergent and Patricia's perfume that seemed to permeate every room. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. How's the first day going? I'm sure you're all getting along wonderfully. So proud of you for stepping up. I stared at the message, unable to formulate a response. How could I explain that stepping up felt suspiciously like being trampled down? That helping family was beginning to feel like losing myself entirely. Upstairs, I heard the shower running in my former bathroom, Patricia's voice, carrying through the walls, as she explained to Marcus where she'd put his clothes in my former closet. The children had claimed the family room cartoons blaring from my television, while they ate snacks that left crumbs on my furniture. I retreated to the guest room, the smallest bedroom in the house that was now supposed to be mine. My clothes hung awkwardly in the narrow closet, and my personal items looked foreign on the unfamiliar dresser. Through the thin walls, I could hear every sound from the master bedroom, where Marcus and Patricia discussed their plans for redecorating. As I lay in the guest bed that night, staring at the ceiling in my own house, where I was now a guest, I realized the invasion was just beginning. This wasn't temporary help during a rough patch. This was a complete takeover disguised as family assistance. And somehow I'd allowed it to happen without firing a single shot in my own defense. Friday morning arrived with the sound of children arguing, and Patricia's voice rising above the chaos, directing breakfast preparations in my kitchen. I stumbled out of the guest room disoriented in my own home, following the smell of bacon and the clatter of dishes I didn't recognize. Good morning, Jeffrey, Patricia chirped brightly, standing at my stove wearing a floral apron over her silk pajama set. I hope you slept well. I made breakfast for everyone. The kitchen bore no resemblance to the organized space I'd maintained for 3 years. Dirty dishes overflowed from the sink, sticky spots covered the countertops, and unfamiliar food items cluttered every surface. Patricia had apparently decided that cooking for 6 people required using every pan, plate, and utensil in the house simultaneously. I usually just have coffee and toast. I mumbled, reaching for the cabinet where I kept my coffee cups. Oh, those are gone, Patricia said matter-of-factly. I packed them away since they didn't match my dishes. We're using the good china now that we're all living together. Family meals should feel special. Her good china turned out to be an elaborate floral pattern that required hand washing and careful handling. I stood holding a delicate cup that cost more than my entire weekly grocery budget, afraid to drink from it and afraid to put it down. Tyler raced past me carrying a piece of bacon, chasing Madison, who shrieked with laughter as she ran through the house. Their sticky fingers left marks on my walls, and their bare feet tracked mysterious stains across my hardwood floors. Tyler, Madison, settle down, Patricia called without any real authority. Jeffrey's not used to children yet. We need to ease him into family life. The phrase family life hit me like cold water. I hadn't signed up for family life. I'd bought this house specifically for solitude, quiet, and the freedom to live exactly as I chose. Now I was apparently enrolled in some domestic boot camp without my consent. Marcus appeared at the bottom of the stairs, already dressed in a business suit that looked expensive despite his unemployed status. Morning, Jeffrey. Patricia, did you iron my interview shirt? Another interview? I asked, hope flaring in my chest. Regional manager position at a consulting firm, Marcus replied, adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror. Much more appropriate for someone with my experience. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely meaning it. When do you start if you get it? Marcus laughed as if I'd made a joke. Jeffrey, these things take time. Interview process, background checks, salary negotiations. Even if they offer me the position, I wouldn't start for at least a month. Probably longer. My heart sank again. Even in the best-case scenario, I was looking at weeks more of this chaos. And that assumed Marcus actually wanted the job, which his track record suggested was far from guaranteed. After Marcus left for his interview, Patricia announced her plans for the day. I've invited some of my mom friends over this afternoon for coffee. I want to show off our new place and introduce them to you. Your mom friends, I repeated weakly. From the kids' school? We've been meeting regularly, but my old apartment was too cramped for entertaining. This house is perfect for hosting. The presumption took my breath away. Patricia was planning to entertain strangers in my home, treating it as her personal social venue. When I started to object, she cut me off with a practiced manipulation technique I was beginning to recognize. Jeffrey, these women are going through divorces, job losses, all kinds of stress. They need friendship and support. Surely you wouldn't want me to cancel on them. They're so excited to meet Marcus's generous brother. The guilt trip worked perfectly, as Patricia knew it would. How could I object to helping stressed women without looking heartless? She'd framed her social gathering as charity work, making any refusal seem selfish and cruel. I went to work feeling like a refugee from my own life, but at least the office provided 8 hours of normalcy. My coworkers noticed my distraction during the morning meetings, and my productivity suffered as I found myself constantly wondering what new changes awaited me at home. Around noon, my phone buzzed with notifications from my home security app. I'd installed cameras several months earlier after a spate of package thefts in the neighborhood, but I'd forgotten about them during the chaos of the invasion. Now I watched in real time as Patricia moved freely through my house, rearranging furniture and decorating for her party. She'd moved my reading chair to the basement and replaced it with a love seat from their old apartment. My coffee table, a solid oak piece I'd spent weeks shopping for, had been pushed against the wall to make room for her glass and chrome monstrosity. Even my book collection had been boxed up and replaced with Patricia's romance novels and parenting magazines. But the security footage revealed something more disturbing than interior decorating. Patricia was going through my personal belongings, opening drawers and cabinets with the casual familiarity of someone who considered herself the lady of the house. She examined my mail-photographed documents from my home office, and even tried on some of my clothes, apparently checking sizes. I watched in horrified fascination as she opened my bedroom dresser and pulled out my personal papers, photographing my bank statements and tax documents with her phone. The violation felt obscene, like watching someone rifle through my underwear drawer while broadcasting it live. When I rushed home during lunch break, I found my house transformed into a social gathering space I didn't recognize. Patricia had lit scented candles that made my eyes water, rearranged all my furniture to create conversation areas, and set up an elaborate spread of refreshments using my dishes and serving pieces. "Jeffrey," she called out brightly as I walked through the door. "Perfect timing. I want you to meet my friends." 3 women sat in my living room, looking perfectly at home, while drinking coffee from my good cups and eating pastries from my china plates. They smiled warmly as Patricia introduced me, clearly having heard flattering stories about my generosity and family devotion. "Jeffrey, this house is absolutely gorgeous," gushed a blonde woman named Carol. "Patricia is so lucky to have such a wonderful brother-in-law." "The kitchen is a dream," added another woman whose name I missed in my stunned state. "I can't believe you're letting them live here rent-free. My brother wouldn't give me a glass of water if I was dying of thirst." Patricia beamed at the praise, accepting credit for my generosity, as if hosting these women in my home was her right rather than her presumption. She gave them a tour of the house, pointing out features and improvements she planned to make, speaking about my property as if it belonged to her. "We're thinking of adding a deck off the master bedroom," she told them as they clustered around my kitchen island. "Jeffrey's been so supportive of all our ideas." I stood frozen in my own doorway, listening to Patricia make plans to modify my house without consulting me. When the women finally left, they hugged Patricia goodbye and thanked me profusely for my hospitality, as if I'd participated in planning their visit instead of discovering it in progress. "That went wonderfully," Patricia said, beginning to clean up the considerable mess. Carol mentioned that her ex-husband is in construction. If we decide to move forward with the deck project, she might be able to get us a discount. "Patricia," I said carefully, "this is still my house. Any modifications need my approval." She laughed as if I'd made another joke. "Of course, Jeffrey. We're all family here. Everything we do benefits everyone." That evening, Marcus returned from his interview in a foul mood. "Waste of time," he announced, throwing his tie over my reading chair. They wanted someone to start immediately, work weekends, travel constantly. Completely unrealistic expectations. "Did they offer you the position?" I asked. "I didn't wait around to find out." If they're going to make unreasonable demands during the interview process, imagine what working there would be like. My last hope for a quick resolution evaporated. Marcus had walked away from another job opportunity, apparently preferring unemployment to accepting work that didn't meet his inflated standards. I was beginning to understand that his job search was performative, designed to justify his presence in my house while avoiding actual employment. That night, I lay in the guest bed, listening to my house settle around its new occupants. Patricia's voice carried through the walls as she made phone calls discussing plans and projects that involved my property. Marcus's snoring rattled the windows, and the children's whispered conversations suggested they were far from sleep, despite Patricia's claims that they were tucked in for the night. My home had become unrecognizable, filled with strangers who treated my hospitality as an entitlement and my generosity as a given. The temporary arrangement felt increasingly permanent, and I was beginning to realize that Marcus and Patricia had never intended to leave. They'd found a comfortable situation with no rent, no responsibilities, and a host who was too polite to enforce boundaries. I was trapped in my own house, a prisoner of my family's expectations and my own inability to say no to people I loved. But as I lay there in the darkness, surrounded by the sounds of my unwanted house guests, I began to wonder if love was really what I was dealing with at all. Saturday morning brought a new horror: Patricia's announcement that she'd enrolled Tyler and Madison in the local elementary school using my address. She made this revelation over breakfast as casually as discussing the weather, apparently expecting me to congratulate her on her initiative. "It's such a better district than their old school," she explained while buttering toast with my good silver. "The test scores are outstanding, and they have an excellent music program. The kids are so excited about their fresh start. You enrolled them in school?" I asked, my voice pitched higher than usual. "Using my address, well, we live here now," Patricia replied with perfect logic. "They need to go somewhere, and this district has much better resources. The counselor was so understanding about their family situation. She even fast-tracked their enrollment when I explained how you generously took us in during our difficult time. The implications crashed over me like ice water. School enrollment wasn't just about education, it was about establishing residency." Patricia had just created official documentation that Marcus's family lived at my address, giving them legal standing that would be much harder to challenge. "Patricia, you should have asked me first. This creates complications with property taxes, voter registration, all kinds of legal issues." She waved her hand dismissively. "Jeffrey, you worry too much about paperwork. The important thing is that Tyler and Madison get the education they deserve. Isn't that what matters?" Before I could respond, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother's number, which usually meant either good news or serious trouble. Given recent events, I suspected the latter. "Jeffrey!" My mother's voice crackled through the speaker. "I just got off the phone with Mrs. Henderson from church. She said Patricia mentioned you might be getting married soon to whom—" The world tilted sideways. "What, Mom? I'm not getting married to anyone." "Well, that's odd. Mrs. Henderson was very specific. She said Patricia mentioned you'd found someone special and might be proposing soon. She was asking about church availability for weddings next spring." I looked across the breakfast table at Patricia, who was studiously avoiding eye contact while helping Madison with her cereal. "Mom, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not dating anyone, let alone planning a wedding." "Are you sure?" Patricia seemed quite confident. "Maybe you're being modest about your romantic life." After I hung up, I confronted Patricia directly. "Why are people at church asking about my wedding plans?" Patricia's cheeks flushed pink, but her voice remained steady. "I might have mentioned that you were seeing someone. People were asking so many questions about why such a handsome, successful man was still single. I didn't want them to think there was something wrong with you. So you invented a girlfriend and wedding plans. I just said you were private about your personal life, but seemed happy lately. If people drew their own conclusions, that's hardly my fault." The lie was so breathtaking in its audacity that I sat speechless. Patricia had created an entirely fictional narrative about my love life to satisfy church gossips, apparently without considering how this would complicate my actual relationships or social standing. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from my sister Jessica. "Mom told me about your secret girlfriend. Why didn't you tell me you were serious about someone? Can't wait to meet her." I was drowning in lies I hadn't told, trapped in stories Patricia had spun without my knowledge or consent. Every conversation with my family would now require navigating around a fictional relationship I knew nothing about. That afternoon, while Patricia took the children to explore their new school playground, I decided to investigate the growing list of inconsistencies in Marcus and Patricia's story. Their financial situation, their job history, their timeline for moving out, everything felt deliberately vague and contradictory. I started with basic internet searches, looking up Marcus's former employer and the circumstances of his departure. What I found chilled me to the bone. The accounting firm hadn't just laid Marcus off due to budget cuts. They'd fired him for falsifying expense reports and suspected embezzlement. The company had been investigating missing funds for months before terminating him. Local news archives revealed more disturbing details. Marcus had been questioned by police as part of an ongoing fraud investigation, though no charges had been filed yet. The timeline suggested his termination was much more serious than simple downsizing. I searched for Patricia's employment history next, remembering her vague references to staying home with the children. According to the state education department's database, Patricia had been a substitute teacher until her certification was revoked for inappropriate conduct. The details were sealed due to the involvement of minors, but the revocation was permanent and statewide. My hands shook as I compiled evidence that my brother and sister-in-law weren't just temporarily down on their luck. They were potentially criminals fleeing consequences in their previous city, using my home as a safe house while they planned their next move. I called Marcus's former colleague, a man named David, who'd worked closely with him for several years. After some awkward small talk, David confirmed my worst fears. Jeffrey. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but Marcus was stealing from client accounts for over a year. The audit revealed almost $50,000 in fraudulent transactions. The only reason he wasn't arrested is that he paid back most of the money when they confronted him. Most of the money, I asked weakly. There's still about $15,000 unaccounted for. The company decided not to press charges if he made restitution, but he never completed the payments. Word is they're considering turning the case over to the district attorney. I hung up feeling sick to my stomach. Marcus wasn't just unemployed, he was a thief hiding from criminal prosecution, and I'd unknowingly provided him with sanctuary, making myself an accessory to his flight from justice. My security cameras had been recording everything since they'd moved in, and I began reviewing the footage more carefully. What I found was worse than random snooping. It was systematic intelligence gathering. Patricia had photographed my financial documents, copied information from my computer, and even searched through my personal papers looking for sensitive data. But the most disturbing discovery came from audio recordings my security system had captured. Late at night when they thought I was asleep, Marcus and Patricia discussed plans that had nothing to do with finding employment or moving out. His credit is perfect. Patricia's voice whispered through my speakers. No debt, excellent payment history, substantial savings. We could open accounts in his name and he'd never know until the bills arrived. Too risky, Marcus replied. Better to establish residency first, get the kids settled in school, make it harder for him to kick us out. Once we have legal standing, we can start phase 2. Phase 2. They had a multi-step plan for exploiting my hospitality, and I was apparently too naive to recognize it. I listened in growing horror as they discussed forging my signature on documents using my address to apply for credit and eventually claiming tenants' rights that would make removing them legally complicated. He's so trusting, Patricia continued. Doesn't even check his mail carefully. I've been intercepting anything that looks official. Banking statements, tax documents, insurance paperwork. He has no idea what we have access to. The brother thing works perfectly, Marcus added. He can't bring himself to suspect family of serious wrongdoing. By the time he figures out what's happening, we'll be too established to remove easily. I sat in my car in the office parking lot, listening to recordings of my own family planning to destroy my financial life. The people I'd trusted with my home, my privacy, my generosity, were actively plotting to steal my identity and ruin my credit. But the worst was yet to come. As I scrolled through more recent recordings, I found conversations that made my blood freeze in my veins. If he gets suspicious or starts asking too many questions, Patricia's voice drifted through my car speakers. We might need to discredit him. Make him look unstable, unreliable. I've been documenting his behavior, taking photos when he looks stressed or confused. What kind of documentation? Marcus asked. Medical concerns? Memory problems? Erratic moods? The kind of things that would make people question his judgment if he started making accusations against us. They weren't just planning to steal from me. They were preparing to gaslight me into appearing mentally unstable if I tried to expose them. I was dealing with sophisticated con artists who'd targeted me specifically because of my family connection and my reluctance to suspect people I loved. I drove home that evening, knowing my life was in immediate danger not from physical violence, but from systematic character assassination designed to destroy my credibility before I could defend myself. Marcus and Patricia had turned my own kindness into a weapon, and they were preparing to use it against me with surgical precision. The invasion of my home had been just the beginning. They were planning to steal my identity, destroy my reputation, and leave me financially ruined while claiming to be the victims of my alleged mental instability. I pulled into my driveway looking at my house with new eyes. It wasn't a sanctuary anymore. It was a crime scene in progress. And I was the designated victim, too trusting and too naive to protect myself from the people who were supposed to love me most. Sunday morning arrived with an announcement that filled me with cold dread. Patricia informed me over breakfast that she'd been offering childcare services to other families in the neighborhood, turning my home into an unlicensed daycare center without my knowledge or consent. "It's just temporary income while Marcus job hunts," she explained while wiping sticky fingerprints off my kitchen counter. "Mrs. Chen from down the street needs someone to watch her twins during the day, and the Patel family is looking for after-school care. Word of mouth is already spreading about my availability." "Patricia, you can't run a business out of my house," I said, trying to keep my voice level despite the panic rising in my chest. "I'm not licensed for commercial activities, and my homeowner's insurance doesn't cover business operations." "Jeffrey, you worry too much about technicalities," she replied dismissively. "I'm just helping neighbors with their children while earning a few dollars. It's not like I'm running a factory." But I knew from my research the previous day that Patricia's teaching certification had been revoked for inappropriate conduct involving minors. The idea of her caring for other people's children in my home while hiding her professional history was terrifying. Besides, Marcus added, appearing at the bottom of the stairs in wrinkled pajamas, "the extra income helps us contribute to household expenses. I thought you'd be pleased that we're finding ways to help with costs." The twisted logic made my head spin. They were using my house to generate income without my permission, then presenting it as a favor to me. The manipulation had become so sophisticated that I wondered how long they'd been planning this con. I excused myself and retreated to my bedroom, which was no longer my bedroom, to make some urgent phone calls. First, I contacted my homeowner's insurance company to understand my liability if someone was injured during unofficial childcare activities on my property. The agent's explanation chilled me to the bone. "Mr. Jeffrey operating an unlicensed daycare facility would void your coverage entirely. If a child were injured on your property during commercial childcare activities, you could be personally liable for medical expenses, legal fees, and damages. We're talking about potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in exposure." I hung up and immediately called my attorney, a sharp woman named Sarah Martinez, who'd handled my house purchase. After explaining the situation, she confirmed my worst fears. "Jeffrey, you need to document everything and get them out of your house immediately. The longer they establish residency, the harder it becomes legally. If they receive mail at your address, enroll children in local schools, and operate businesses from the property, they can claim tenants' rights even without a lease." "What kind of tenants' rights?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "In Illinois, anyone who can prove they've been living somewhere for more than 30 days has the right to formal eviction proceedings. That means you'd have to file court papers, wait for hearings, prove they're not legitimate tenants. The process can take months, even with perfect documentation." I was running out of time. Marcus and Patricia were systematically establishing legal footholds that would make removing them increasingly difficult. Every day I waited was another day they could claim deeper entrenchment in my property. That afternoon, while Patricia met with potential childcare clients in my living room, I took a different approach. I called a private investigator recommended by my attorney, a former police detective named James Morrison, who specialized in fraud cases. "Mr. Jeffrey E. Morrison said after I'd explained the situation, what you're describing sounds like organized family exploitation, possibly part of a larger pattern. These people are professionals. Let me do some research and get back to you. Morrison called me back within hours with information that made my blood run cold. Marcus and Patricia had fled Phoenix 18 months earlier after pulling a similar scam on Patricia's elderly uncle. They'd moved into his home under the guise of providing care, then systematically drained his bank accounts and forged his signature on loan documents. When the uncle tried to remove them, they claimed he was suffering from dementia and filed for guardianship. The uncle died before the case was resolved, Morrison continued. Heart attack possibly brought on by stress. Marcus and Patricia inherited the house because they'd convinced him to change his will. The family suspects foul play, but there wasn't enough evidence for criminal charges. They killed someone, I whispered. They definitely contributed to his death through financial and emotional abuse. The pattern is clear. They target trusting family members, establish residency, then systematically destroy their victim's life while claiming to be caregivers or dependents. I listened in horror as Morrison described additional cases in 3 different states. Marcus and Patricia were serial family predators, moving from victim to victim and leaving financial ruin in their wake. I wasn't their first target, I was just their most recent mark. The good news, Morrison continued, is that you caught on early. Most victims don't realize what's happening until they've been completely cleaned out. You still have time to protect yourself, but you need to act fast. Morrison outlined a plan that would give me the evidence I needed to expose them while protecting myself from their inevitable retaliation. The first step was installing additional hidden cameras throughout my house to document their activities. The second was pretending to be increasingly unwell, making myself appear vulnerable while secretly gathering proof of their crimes. They're already planning to discredit you, Morrison explained. I heard the recordings you sent. If you suddenly start acting suspicious or confrontational, they'll accelerate their timeline and claim you're having a breakdown. Better to let them think their plan is working while you build an airtight case. That evening, I began my performance. I complained about headaches, forgot simple things, and acted confused about conversations that had happened earlier. Marcus and Patricia exchanged meaningful glances, clearly pleased that their psychological manipulation was taking effect. "Jeffrey, you seem tired lately," Patricia said with false concern. "Maybe you should see a doctor. Stress can cause all sorts of problems." "I'm fine," I mumbled, playing the part of someone in denial about declining mental health. "Just busy at work. You forgot to take your vitamins this morning." She continued, showing me a pill organizer I'd never seen before. "And you left the coffee maker on all night yesterday." Little things like that can be early warning signs. I realized with growing horror that Patricia had been documenting these alleged incidents, creating a paper trail of my supposed memory problems. The vitamins were probably placebos or something worse, designed to make me actually feel unwell. Every symptom she mentioned was either fabricated or caused by their sabotage. Over the next several days, I played my part perfectly while Morrison's team gathered additional evidence. We discovered that Marcus and Patricia were wanted for questioning in connection with several elderly exploitation cases across the country. Their pattern was always the same: target vulnerable family members, establish residency, then systematically drain their resources while claiming to provide care. The most disturbing revelation came when Morrison traced their financial history. They had no legitimate source of income and hadn't paid taxes in over 3 years. Instead, they moved from victim to victim, living off fraud and identity theft while staying ahead of law enforcement. My house wasn't just temporary shelter. It was their base of operations for expanding their criminal enterprise. "They're probably running multiple scams simultaneously," Morrison explained during one of our secret meetings. "Credit card fraud, insurance fraud, identity theft. Your home gives them a stable address for receiving fraudulent documents and establishing credibility with new victims. I was harboring fugitives without knowing it, and my kindness had made me an accessory to crimes I couldn't even imagine." But Morrison assured me that my cooperation with the investigation would protect me from prosecution while helping to build cases against Marcus and Patricia. "We're coordinating with federal investigators," he said. "This isn't just local fraud anymore. They've crossed state lines multiple times, used mail systems for fraud, and targeted elderly victims. That makes it federal jurisdiction with serious prison time." As I lay in bed that night, listening to Marcus and Patricia discuss their plans through the hidden microphones, I felt a mixture of fear and determination. They thought they were winning, systematically destroying my life, while I remained oblivious to their machinations. But they had no idea that every word, every action, every crime was being documented by professionals who specialized in catching predators exactly like them. Their confidence would become their downfall, and my apparent vulnerability was actually the bait in a trap they'd never see coming. The game was changing, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't the helpless victim anymore. The opportunity I'd been waiting for arrived on a Thursday morning when Patricia announced she needed to take Tyler to a doctor's appointment in their former city. She claimed it was a specialist who knew his medical history, but I suspected she was planning to handle unfinished business from their previous scam. "We'll be gone all day," she told me over breakfast, her voice carrying that false sweetness I'd learned to recognize as a warning sign. "Madison has school, and Marcus has a promising interview lined up. You'll have some peace and quiet for once." This was perfect. Morrison and his team had been waiting for an opportunity when Marcus and Patricia would be separated, making their communications less coordinated. With Patricia gone, Marcus would be more likely to make mistakes or reveal information he usually kept hidden. I called in sick to work, claiming the same mysterious headaches that had been part of my performance for the past week. Patricia seemed pleased by this development, noting with fake sympathy that I'd been getting worse lately. "Maybe you should make a doctor's appointment too," she suggested. "These episodes you've been having are concerning. Memory lapses, confusion, mood swings. It's probably nothing serious, but better safe than sorry." I agreed to consider it, knowing she was documenting every symptom for her eventual claim that I was mentally unfit to make decisions about my own property. What she didn't know was that Morrison's team had identified the source of my supposed symptoms. Patricia had been adding small amounts of over-the-counter sleep medication to my coffee each morning, just enough to make me groggy and forgetful. After Patricia left with Tyler, I put the next phase of our plan into motion. I began acting increasingly paranoid and unstable, muttering about people watching me and expressing confusion about recent events. The hidden cameras captured every moment as Marcus watched with satisfaction, clearly believing his psychological manipulation was succeeding. "Jeffrey, you're scaring me," Madison said when I started talking to myself about hidden cameras and people plotting against me. "Are you okay?" "Don't worry about your uncle," Marcus told her with practiced reassurance. "He's just stressed from work. Sometimes adults need help when they're overwhelmed." The way he comforted his daughter while simultaneously documenting my alleged breakdown was chilling. Marcus was using his own child as a witness to my supposed mental deterioration, creating testimony that would be devastating in any legal proceeding. Around noon, Marcus made the phone call Morrison had predicted. I listened from my hiding spot in the basement as he spoke to someone about accelerating their timeline. "He's getting worse faster than we expected," Marcus said quietly. "Patricia thinks we should move to phase 3 ahead of schedule. The medical documentation is building, but if he has a complete breakdown before we're ready, it could complicate things." Phase 3. Morrison had warned me about this, though we could only guess what it entailed. Based on their previous patterns, it likely involved triggering a crisis that would justify their permanent takeover of my property and finances. "No, we can't wait for the full psychological evaluation," Marcus continued. "If he starts making accusations while he still appears coherent, people might believe him. Better to establish guardianship while he's clearly incompetent." Guardianship. They were planning to have me declared mentally unfit and take legal control of my life. I felt sick thinking about their previous victim, Patricia's uncle, who died under mysterious circumstances while they fought for control of his estate. That afternoon, Marcus received a visitor that changed everything. Through my security cameras, I watched a woman in professional attire arrive at my front door. She introduced herself as Dr. Rebecca Hamilton, a psychologist Marcus had contacted about conducting an emergency mental health evaluation. Mr. Marcus called me about his brother's deteriorating condition. She explained when Marcus let her into my house without my permission. He's concerned that Jeffrey might be a danger to himself or others. I realized with growing horror that Marcus had hired a corrupt professional to rubber stamp my incompetence. This wasn't a legitimate evaluation. It was a predetermined outcome designed to justify their legal takeover of my property. "Where is Jeffrey now?" Dr. Hamilton asked, looking around my living room as if she owned it. "Sleeping," Marcus replied. "He's been having episodes where he stays awake all night talking to people who aren't there, then crashes during the day. Yesterday, he accused me of poisoning his food." The irony was breathtaking. Marcus was describing actual symptoms caused by Patricia's drugging while presenting them as evidence of mental illness. Every detail he provided was technically accurate, but completely devoid of context. "I've documented everything." Marcus continued, showing Dr. Hamilton a folder I'd never seen before. Photographs of him in confused states, recordings of his paranoid ramblings, witness statements from family members who've observed his decline. Morrison's voice crackled through my hidden earpiece. "This is it, Jeffrey. They're about to spring the trap. Are you ready?" I took a deep breath and began the most important performance of my life. Stumbling up from the basement, I appeared in the living room looking disheveled and confused, playing the part of someone in the grip of a mental health crisis. "Marcus," I said in a shaky voice, "who is this woman? Why are there strangers in my house?" "Jeffrey, this is Dr. Hamilton," Marcus said with false patience. "Remember, I told you she was coming to talk with you about how you've been feeling?" "I don't remember," I mumbled, looking around the room with apparent confusion. "Things have been strange lately. People moving my stuff, changing things when I'm not looking." Dr. Hamilton made notes while observing my behavior, clearly seeing what she'd been paid to see. "Jeffrey, can you tell me what day it is?" I gave her the wrong day, then corrected myself uncertainly. "Tuesday, no wait. Wednesday?" "I'm sorry, the days all blur together." "Have you been sleeping well?" she continued. "There are voices," I said quietly. "Conversations when I'm trying to sleep. People talking about me making plans. But when I get up to check, there's nobody there." This was actually true. I'd been hearing Marcus and Patricia's plotting through the surveillance equipment. But in this context, it sounded like auditory hallucinations symptomatic of severe mental illness. "Jeffrey," Dr. Hamilton said gently, "your brother is concerned about you. He thinks you might need some help, perhaps a stay in a facility where professionals can evaluate your condition properly." The trap was closing exactly as Morrison had predicted. They planned to have me committed to a psychiatric facility where I'd be drugged into compliance while they gained control of my assets. By the time I was released, if I ever was, they'd have stripped my accounts and claimed ownership of my property. "I don't want to go anywhere," I said, allowing real fear to creep into my voice. "This is my house. I just want people to stop moving my things." "Sometimes we don't know what's best for us when we're unwell," Marcus said with practiced sympathy. "The important thing is getting you the help you need." Dr. Hamilton nodded approvingly. "I think a 72-hour evaluation would be appropriate. We can arrange transportation this afternoon." "No," I shouted, suddenly becoming agitated. "You can't make me leave my own house. Marcus, tell her this is my house." "Jeffrey, please calm down," Marcus said, moving toward me as if to restrain someone having a psychotic episode. "You're not thinking clearly right now." This was the moment Morrison had prepared me for. As Marcus reached for me, I backed away and shouted the predetermined phrase, "Get your hands off me! Help someone help me!" Within seconds, my front door exploded open as federal agents poured into the house. Dr. Hamilton screamed and dove behind my couch while Marcus stood frozen, his hands still extended toward me, as armed professionals surrounded him. Marcus Thompson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, and attempted kidnapping, the lead agent announced while handcuffing my brother. Dr. Rebecca Hamilton, you're under arrest for conspiracy and professional misconduct. The transformation was immediate and complete. My apparent mental breakdown evaporated as I straightened up, pulled the hidden microphone from my shirt, and looked directly at Marcus with clear, focused eyes. "Hello, Marcus," I said calmly. "I believe you were just discussing guardianship arrangements." The look of shock and betrayal on his face was deeply satisfying. "Jeffrey, but how did you—" "I've been recording everything for weeks," I told him, as agents led him toward the door. "Every conversation, every plan, every crime. You thought I was losing my mind, but I was actually gathering evidence to put you in prison where you belong." Morrison appeared from the kitchen carrying boxes of documents and computer equipment. "We've got everything, Jeffrey. Financial records, forged documents, evidence of the drugging, recorded confessions to multiple felonies across several states." As they led Marcus away, he looked back at me with pure hatred. "You have no idea what you've done, Jeffrey. Patricia will destroy you for this. Our children will grow up knowing their uncle betrayed their family." "Your children will grow up knowing their parents are criminals," I replied without emotion. "Maybe that will save them from becoming criminals themselves." The house fell silent after the arrests, broken only by the sound of federal agents cataloging evidence. Morrison found Patricia's stash of forged documents hidden in my attic, along with stolen mail and photocopied financial records from multiple victims. "She'll be arrested when she returns with Tyler," Morrison assured me. "We have units watching their former apartment and all the places she might run. There's nowhere to hide from federal charges." I stood in my living room, finally quiet after weeks of chaos, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. The nightmare was over, but the reckoning was just beginning. Patricia's arrest 3 hours later provided the final piece of evidence that sealed the case against both of them. She walked into my house expecting to find Marcus celebrating the success of their psychological manipulation, only to discover federal agents waiting with handcuffs and a warrant listing dozens of charges spanning multiple states. "Where's Marcus?" she demanded, looking around my living room as if he might be hiding behind the furniture. "Where's my husband?" "Mrs. Thompson, you're under arrest," Agent Chen announced, reading her rights, while Patricia's face cycled through confusion, anger, and finally desperate calculation as she realized their con had been exposed. "Jeffrey, tell them there's been a mistake," she pleaded, switching to the manipulative tone I'd learned to recognize. "We're family." Whatever Marcus told them, he was just confused. He's been under so much stress lately. I looked at the woman who'd spent weeks poisoning my food, documenting fake symptoms of mental illness, and planning to steal my identity, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "Patricia, I've heard the recordings of you and Marcus planning my murder. There's no coming back from that." Her face went white as the implications hit her. They'd been so confident in their surveillance countermeasures, so certain I was too trusting to suspect family members of serious crimes. The reality that I'd been actively investigating them for weeks clearly hadn't occurred to either of them. Tyler, who'd been waiting in Patricia's car during the arrest, was immediately taken into protective custody by Child Services. The boy looked confused and frightened as social workers explained that he'd be staying with different family members while his parents faced federal charges. "Uncle Jeffrey," Tyler said as they led him toward the social worker's vehicle. "Mommy said you were sick. Are you better now?" The innocence in his voice broke my heart. Tyler and Madison had been weaponized by their parents, used as emotional manipulation tools, and trained to lie about adult behavior they couldn't possibly understand. They were victims too, just as damaged by Marcus and Patricia's criminal lifestyle as the people they'd scammed. "I'm fine, Tyler," I told him gently. "The sickness was pretend, like playing a game. The important thing now is that you and Madison are safe. Within 72 hours, federal investigators had unraveled the full scope of Marcus and Patricia's criminal enterprise. The evidence found in my house led to charges in 7 different states, connecting them to more than 20 victims over the past 5 years. Morrison briefed me on the investigation's findings in my living room, which felt surreal after weeks of treating it as enemy territory. "They've been running this scam systematically," he explained, spreading case files across my coffee table. "Always targeting family members who were financially successful but emotionally vulnerable. Always using children as manipulation tools. The pattern was consistent and chilling. They'd identify successful relatives, research their financial situations, then manufacture crises that required temporary housing. Once established in their target's home, they'd begin the psychological manipulation while systematically gathering financial information and building legal cases for taking control." Patricia's uncle in Phoenix wasn't their first victim, Morrison continued. "They killed a grandmother in Nevada using the same method. Slow poisoning designed to mimic natural cognitive decline while they gained power of attorney and drained her accounts. 3 victims had died under suspicious circumstances, while Marcus and Patricia gained access to their estates. The FBI was reopening those cases as potential homicides armed with evidence of their methods and motives. The fake doctor who came to evaluate you was part of a larger network," Morrison added. "Dr. Hamilton has been providing fraudulent mental health evaluations for financial predators across the country. Her arrest opened up dozens of additional cases. My parents' reaction to the arrest was devastating to witness. My father suffered a mild heart attack when federal agents explained that his son wasn't just a thief, but a suspected serial killer who'd targeted elderly family members across multiple states. The guilt and shame of having enabled Marcus's access to my home nearly destroyed him. How could we not know?" my mother kept repeating during her hospitalization for what doctors called stress-induced cardiac episodes. "How could we help someone plan to murder our own son?" The community reaction was equally intense. Church members who'd praised my generosity in housing my brother's family now looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and horror. The story dominated local news for weeks, with reporters describing it as one of the most sophisticated family exploitation cases in state history. Jessica handled the revelation worst of all family members. She'd been Marcus's most vocal supporter, actively pressuring me to house his family and criticizing my reluctance as selfishness. Learning that her advocacy had nearly enabled my murder broke something fundamental in her worldview. "I kept telling you to trust family," she sobbed during one of our difficult conversations. "I made you feel guilty for having boundaries. If you'd listened to me, you'd be dead right now." The guilt ate at her so severely that she required professional counseling to process her role in the conspiracy. Our relationship took years to rebuild, and even then it never returned to its previous closeness. The trial became a media spectacle that exposed the shocking prevalence of family financial abuse. Marcus and Patricia's case opened discussions about how criminals exploit family loyalty and social expectations to victimize their own relatives. My testimony was particularly crucial because I'd been their intended final victim. The recordings of them planning my murder, combined with evidence of their systematic poisoning and psychological manipulation, painted a clear picture of premeditated homicide for financial gain. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the prosecutor said during closing arguments, "the defendants didn't just steal money, they stole trust, destroyed families, and killed vulnerable people who loved them. Jeffrey Thompson survived only because he was smart enough to document their crimes and brave enough to fight back. Marcus received 28 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Patricia got 25 years, with the difference reflecting her slightly lesser role in the planning stages of their crimes. Dr. Hamilton received 15 years for her role in providing fraudulent evaluations that enabled financial predators. The children were placed with Patricia's sister in Arizona, a woman who'd cut contact with Patricia years earlier due to suspicious financial requests. Madison and Tyler began therapy to address the trauma of watching their parents manipulate and abuse family members while teaching them to participate in criminal activities. I sold my house 6 months after the arrests, unable to feel comfortable in a space that held so many traumatic memories. The new owners were a young family with children who filled the rooms with laughter instead of schemes which felt like appropriate healing for the property itself. My new home in Colorado represented a complete fresh start 3 states away from the toxic family dynamics that had nearly destroyed me. I kept limited contact with my parents as they worked through their own guilt and shame, but I never again allowed family obligations to override my personal safety instincts. The experience taught me that love isn't blind trust and family isn't an excuse for abuse. Real family members support your boundaries rather than manipulating you to violate them. People who truly care about your welfare don't exploit your kindness or use your generosity against you. I used the reward money from helping solve multiple cold cases to establish a foundation that educates families about financial abuse and provides resources for victims of relative exploitation. The nonprofit work transformed my trauma into purpose, helping other people recognize and escape similar situations before they became victims. 3 years later, I received a letter from Madison, now 14 and living with her aunt. She wrote that she'd learned the truth about her parents' crimes and wanted to apologize for being part of their manipulation. Her therapy had helped her understand that she'd been a victim too trained from childhood to help her parents hurt people. I wrote back encouraging her education and emphasizing that children aren't responsible for their parents' crimes. Madison deserved a chance at a healthy life free from the toxic patterns that had defined her childhood. Tyler, now 11, was reportedly doing well in school and showing no signs of his parents' manipulative tendencies. The final chapter of this story came 5 years after their arrest, when I testified at Marcus and Patricia's parole hearings. Both had been model prisoners, participating in therapy programs and expressing remorse for their crimes. Their lawyers argued that they'd been rehabilitated and deserved early release. I opposed their parole applications not from revenge but from genuine concern for public safety. People who spent years perfecting the art of family manipulation and murder couldn't be trusted to reform after a few years in prison. Their victims deserved better protection than hopes and therapeutic programs. The parole board agreed, denying both applications and recommending they serve their full sentences. Marcus and Patricia would remain in prison until they were too old to pose a realistic threat to vulnerable family members. Standing in that hearing room, looking at the 2 people who tried to destroy my life while claiming to love me, I felt something unexpected forgiveness. Not for their crimes, which were unforgivable, but for the toxic family dynamics that had made their manipulation possible. I'd learned that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation or trust. It simply means releasing the anger that ties you to people who hurt you. Marcus and Patricia would spend the rest of their lives paying for their choices, but I was free to build something better from the ashes of their destruction. Today I live in a beautiful home surrounded by mountains, working remotely for a tech company that values my expertise without demanding my soul. I have genuine friends who respect boundaries and support healthy choices. My romantic relationships are built on mutual respect rather than family obligation. Most importantly, I've learned that protecting yourself from toxic people isn't selfish or cruel. It's necessary survival, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved is refusing to enable destructive behavior, even when that means standing alone against people who share your DNA. Family isn't defined by blood relations or guilt-imposed obligations. Real family consists of people who genuinely care about your well-being and would never deliberately harm you for their own benefit. Everyone deserves that kind of family, and everyone has the right to create it by choosing people who actually love them instead of people who merely claim to. The scars from that experience will always remain, but they've become reminders of my strength rather than symbols of victimhood. I survived a calculated attempt to destroy my life by people who were supposed to protect me, and I used that survival to help others facing similar threats. That's not just justice, that's transformation. And sometimes transformation is the greatest revenge of all. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family members expected you to sacrifice your boundaries for their benefit? How did you handle the pressure to help relatives who seemed to take advantage of your kindness? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you or helped you recognize similar patterns in your own life, please like this video and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family manipulation and toxic relationships. Sharing these experiences helps other people realize they're not alone in dealing with difficult family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my story and supporting this channel. Remember that you have the right to protect yourself from anyone who tries to harm you, regardless of their relationship to you. Stay strong, trust your instincts, and never let anyone convince you that love requires accepting abuse. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the people who genuinely care about you.